Ladies and gentlemen of YouTube, what is going on out there? How have you been, and how's the world been treating you? I know it's been a while since I've made one of these videos. It's been like 2 to 3 years. However, I actually kind of miss making these videos, and my cousins miss them too, so I decided to get back into them and just start making videos on reasons why you shouldn't move to a particular city. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the Emerald City, Seattle, Washington, a popular, well-known city and tourist destination here in the United States that I'm sure a lot of you have been to, especially if you live in the Pacific Northwest. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the 5 reasons why you shouldn't move to the city. Now, technically, if you're new to my videos, I'm not exactly hating on the city. I'm not telling you not to move here. It's a great city. I really like Seattle. I think it's a great place to visit and still a good place to live in. However, and if you've seen World According to Briggs or Nick Johnson, which is what this video is inspired by, they're YouTubers who talk about cities and states, and I highly recommend checking out their channels. They list reasons why you shouldn't move to a particular city or a particular state even. And they've actually shifted directions in recent years, but yeah, essentially this video is going to be talking about 5 reasons why you shouldn't move to the city. It's a great city, like I said before. I've been there a couple times. I actually went there at the beginning of 2024 for Anthro Northwest 6. That is a furry convention that happens every year in Seattle, and yes, I'm in that group. If you've seen my WasabiCon vlog, you know that I'm part of that group. So yeah, I just want to list the reasons why you might want to reconsider living in the city. Maybe you landed a job here and are moving here, or you're working from home and want to relocate to the Emerald City. But before you do, you should watch my 5 reasons not to move to Seattle, Washington. Number 5, tolls. Now, this is coming from someone who lives in a city and state where there are no tolls, at least not yet. And God forbid do they ever introduce tolls in this state. They're actually planning on bringing tolls to Oregon, but I hope they never do, because I've dealt with them in Seattle, and trust me, they're a pain. No one wants to deal with them because they're quite pricey, and it's difficult to get yourself out of one. I was hit with 2 tolls when I was making my driving videos for TikTok. If you haven't seen my TikTok page, I used to drive around in cities and record the driving, and actually after I got hit with the tolls in Seattle, I stopped doing it. But yeah, I got on the wrong highway, wrong freeway, and got hit by a toll twice. And I got hit with a 3rd toll when I was driving home. Now, I did try to write an appeal when I got the bill in the mail to get myself out of these tolls, but they denied my appeal, and unfortunately I had to pay the full amount. So yeah, if you're coming from a state that doesn't have any tolls that are cheaper than Seattle, or if you don't have a job that pays you well enough so that you could pay for a good-to-go pass with ease, or say you could cover all the tolls, you might want to reconsider Seattle, because if you have to commute on the highway for your work, you're going to be constantly paying to have to go through that highway. Number 4, altitude and terrain. Much like the previous entry, this is coming from someone who has never experienced altitude sickness before and who has also never had an issue going through cities that have terrains that constantly go up and downhill. However, I acknowledge that there are those of you who do. Seattle, well, I'm not exactly the best when it comes to understanding how high above sea level Seattle is, but I understand it's kind of high above sea level essentially, and with Seattle, it has a very, it has constant up and downhill slopes and a lot of hills as part of its terrain, much like the case with San Francisco. Now, personally, I didn't feel nauseated at all when I went to Seattle. I've been there a couple times, and I've never had difficulty navigating around the city when it comes to going uphill, going downhill, either by car, by public transportation, or by foot. However, I acknowledge that some of you do have this type of issue where you have difficulty going uphill and getting downhill, especially those of you who go by foot, and I understand some of you can easily get altitude sickness for going just a couple feet above sea level. So I wanted you guys to look into that if you are thinking about moving to Seattle, if you're the type of person who experiences that. Much like Portland, a lot of the mountains are mainly outside of the vicinity of the city. We have a hill to the west of the city that divides Portland from the suburbs, and of course there's Mount Hood to the east. But if you're somebody who has difficulty going up and downhill constantly and still has issues when it comes to altitude sickness and can't feel like you can go too high above sea level or at all above sea level, then think twice before moving to Seattle. Number 3, protests. Before I delve into this topic, I want to make a personal statement on this matter. I support the First Amendment and the freedom of expression. I support freedom of speech and the right to assembly and organize, and I understand that this involves the right to protest. And I do believe that there are protests on good causes, such as Free Palestine, which I think is a good cause, and there have been other protests on good causes too. However, for me personally, this is just not the way to practice freedom of speech the most efficiently and the most wisely. To cut things short, I just don't really like protesting. It's just not for me. Unlike the previous two entries, I have participated in protests before. Well, I only did one protest, but didn't really like it. I just don't think it's a very good way to practice freedom of speech, and especially if that protest can and likely will, depending on the subject or depending on the topic, evolve into a riot. And this is something you should keep in mind before you move to Seattle, because since Seattle is a blue city, not saying that there's anything wrong with that, whether you're blue, red, or purple city, whatever, but because it's a major metropolitan city with a political affiliation, they will have protests and in some cases riots like the one that happened 4 years ago in regards to different matters or different hot topics or controversies out there. Whether it's presidential elections or racial justice, Free Palestine or Occupy Wall Street, protests for climate change, or anything else that's on the agenda out there, there will be protests and in some cases riots. If you can't handle these, can't handle roads being blocked, loud noises, or seeing large groups of people with picket signs, if you think that this is just not going to work for you, then this is something you need to consider. Number 2, the cost of living. If you haven't already figured this out, it is not cheap to live in the Seattle area. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's actually quite pricey to live in the Seattle area. My dad would definitely know that. He lived in Kirkland, one of the suburbs in Seattle, and it was quite pricey even though he was renting the place to live. According to the YouTubers I've seen, particularly World According to Briggs, when he talked about Seattle in one of his videos, he stated that the cost of living in Seattle is 80% higher than the Washington average and 20% higher than the national average, not to mention the high property tax that comes along with it too. Yeah, Seattle's definitely not on the lower end of the housing market when it comes to the price. And I'm not surprised personally. It's a major metropolitan city and with a high-tech scene and with major companies like Boeing, Amazon, and Starbucks in the area. So unless you've landed a well-paying job, you probably won't be able to afford living in Seattle. Taking our number 1 spot on this list is the weather. It rains a lot, and I mean a lot in Seattle. In fact, it rains so much that they are notorious for having some of the shortest and gloomiest summers. Not even joking, thanks to the weather in Seattle, they have the lowest number of sunny days during any summer from June to August. In fact, when we visited Seattle at the beginning of the year, it rained pretty much every single day. On top of that, while I might be wrong, even though I visited the city in the winter, I think it snows more often in Seattle than it does in Portland and the rest of the state of Oregon, knowing that Seattle is further up north. Much like most of you, I am not favorable of the rain. I hate the rain, even though I acknowledge and understand that it's good for the cities and for the country as a whole. We need rain. I personally can't put up with it. And I'm sorry for those of you who are into snow, but I cannot stand the snow either. In fact, I actually hate snow more than the rain. Yeah, sorry for those of you out there who love the snow, but I'm more of a snowbird. I prefer to live in the warmer, drier climates. And this is all opinion-based, but of course, I think that we can all agree that it rains too much in Seattle, even when compared to Portland and other cities in the Pacific Northwest. If you can't put up with the rain, then you are not going to enjoy living in Seattle, because like I said, it'll happen way more often than pretty much any city in the Pacific Northwest, including Portland, Oregon, and Vancouver, British Columbia. I personally didn't have a problem with the rain when I went there at the beginning of the year, but as a result of the rain, I chose not to go to the Smith Tower or Columbia Center observation decks. Usually I would save those places for when the weather is actually nice. Well, folks, that concludes my 5 reasons not to move to Seattle. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Feel free to hit that like and subscribe button if you did. Seattle's a great city overall, and I would still consider living there. However, if any of the 5 reasons I listed are an issue, then maybe this is not the right city for you. Hope to see you all in the next video, and stay tuned for more content from me.